The iron shackles had worn Caleb Lawson's wrists down to raw meat, but it was the hunger gnawing at his belly that would kill him first. 3 weeks in the orc war camp had taught him that death came slowly here, measured in rations withheld and beatings delivered with methodical precision. And he had stopped praying for rescue after the first 10 days, when it became clear that his regiment had either been slaughtered or retreated too far south to mount a recovery mission. The holding pen stank of unwashed bodies and despair. 17 human soldiers remained from the original 43 captured after the border skirmish at Hollowbrook Ridge. Some had died from their wounds. Others had simply stopped eating, choosing a faster exit than what the orcs had planned. Caleb had watched 3 men get dragged away to the command tent and never return, their screams carrying across the camp until they didn't anymore. He kept his head down and his mouth shut, conserving what little strength remained. At 24, he had seen enough of war to know that survival required patience and awareness. The orc guards rotated in shifts, and he had memorized their patterns the way his father had once taught him to memorize crop cycles back on the family farm in Millbrook. The tall one with the scarred shoulder came at dawn and dusk. The thick-necked brute with the chain mail took the middle watch, and the female warrior with the bone beads woven into her black braids walked the perimeter alone during the deepest part of night. She was different from the others. Caleb had noticed it in small ways. She never participated in the beatings. She checked the water trough twice per shift, ensuring it stayed filled even when protocol called for rationing. Her eyes, bright amber in the firelight, held something that looked uncomfortably like regret when she looked at the prisoners. On his 22nd night in captivity, everything changed. The camp had settled into its usual restless silence, punctuated by coughing and the occasional moan of pain. Caleb dozed against the fence post, his body having learned to sleep sitting up with his arms chained above his head. The position was agony, but lying down meant being stepped on by other prisoners in the dark. A hand clamped over his mouth and his eyes flew open. The female orc guard crouched before him, her green skin nearly black in the shadows. She wore her usual leather armor, and a wicked curved blade hung at her hip. Her tusks, small and slightly protruding from her lower jaw, caught what little moonlight filtered through the clouds. "Make no sound," she whispered in accented but clear human tongue. "I am going to remove your chains. When I do, you will stand slowly and follow me. If you alert the others, we both die. Nod if you understand." Caleb's heart hammered against his ribs. This was either salvation or some new torture he couldn't yet comprehend. He nodded. She produced a key and worked at the shackles binding his wrists to the post. The metal gave with a soft click that sounded deafening in the quiet. Blood rushed back into his arms, bringing pins and needles so intense he had to bite his tongue to keep from gasping. She caught him as he swayed, steadying him with hands that were surprisingly gentle despite their obvious strength. "Can you walk?" She breathed against his ear. He tested his legs. They trembled but held. Another nod. "Run now, thank me later," she said, and then she was moving, pulling him along the inside of the fence line where the shadows lay thickest. Caleb's mind reeled even as his body obeyed. 22 days of captivity ended in a span of heartbeats as they slipped between gaps in the perimeter he had never noticed, past guard positions that were mysteriously vacant. She moved like smoke, silent and fluid, and he did his best to match her pace despite legs weakened by weeks of abuse. They were 50 yards from the camp when the alarm bell rang. "Now you run," she snarled and shoved him toward the tree line. "South and east. 3 miles you will find a stream. Follow it downstream until dawn. Do not stop." "What about you?" The words came out before he could stop them. Her amber eyes flashed with something fierce. I am already dead. Go." She turned back toward the camp, drawing her blade, and Caleb ran. He ran like he hadn't run since he was a boy racing his brothers through the wheat fields. He ran despite the pain shooting through his legs and the burning in his lungs. Branches whipped his face and roots tried to trip him, but he kept moving, driven by the sounds of shouting behind him and the memory of those amber eyes. He found the stream just as false dawn painted the sky gray. His legs gave out and he collapsed at the water's edge, drinking in desperate gulps until his stomach revolted and he retched into the mud. For long minutes he simply lay there, every part of him screaming in protest. But he was alive, free. And somewhere behind him, an orc woman who had no reason to help him was facing execution for her mercy. Caleb forced himself to his feet and kept walking downstream. Survival first, questions later. The sun was high when he finally collapsed in a hollow between two fallen logs. His body simply refused further orders, shutting down despite his mind's protests. He woke to darkness and the sound of his own teeth chattering. The autumn night had turned cold and his ragged uniform provided no warmth. He needed shelter, food, a way to build fire without being spotted. The skills his father had drilled into him on the farm suddenly seemed inadequate for this situation. He knew crops and livestock and the simple satisfactions of rural life. War had been thrust upon him when the orc clans pushed across the northern border, and he had marched to defend his home because that was what young men did. Now he was alone in enemy territory with no supplies and no clear path home. Movement downstream caught his attention. He froze, pressing himself into the shadows between the logs. A figure moved through the trees with that same fluid grace that had guided him through the camp perimeter. Even in darkness, he recognized the shape of her, the way she carried herself. The orc woman was tracking him. Caleb's mind raced through possibilities. Had she been sent to recapture him? Was this some elaborate hunt for sport? But then she stumbled, catching herself against a tree, and in the moonlight breaking through the canopy, he saw the dark stain spreading across her side. She was wounded. Badly. Every instinct screamed at him to stay hidden. She was the enemy, a member of the species that had killed his friends and held him prisoner for 3 weeks. But those amber eyes looking at the water trough, her whispered command. "Run now, thank me later." He stood up from his hiding place. She spun toward him, blade materializing in her hand despite the clear pain the movement cost her. They stared at each other across 20 feet of forest floor, predator and prey reversed and confused. "You should be miles from here," she said, her voice rough with pain. "So should you," Caleb replied. "You are hurt." Observation of the obvious. This is a human trait, yes. Despite the pain, her tone carried a hint of something that might have been humor. "I will survive. Keep moving south. The border is 4 days on foot if you avoid the patrol routes." She turned to go and immediately swayed, catching herself against a tree. The blade fell from her grip as she clutched her side. Dark blood, nearly black in the moonlight, seeped between her fingers. Caleb moved without conscious thought, crossing the distance between them. Years of helping birth calves and mend fences had given him steady hands in crisis. He caught her as her legs buckled, easing her down against the tree trunk. "Let me see," he said, reaching for her side, her hand shot out, gripping his wrist with surprising strength. "Do not touch me. My people find me helping you, they kill us both. Humans find me with you, same result. This is not your debt to carry. You saved my life. That makes it exactly my debt." He met her amber gaze steadily. "Either let me help or we both die here. Those are the choices." For a long moment she simply stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then her grip loosened and she let her hand fall away. "You are foolish, but I am in no position to refuse foolish help." Her armor had taken a blade strike that had cracked the leather and driven through to the flesh beneath her ribs. The wound was deep but clean, not the ragged tear that would have meant internal damage. Caleb tore strips from his already ragged uniform, using water from the stream to clean the blood away as best he could. She hissed through her teeth but didn't cry out, watching his face with an intensity that made him self-conscious. "Why did you do it?" he asked as he worked, needing to fill the silence with something other than her controlled breathing. "Free me, I mean. Because I am tired of killing," she said after a moment. "Tired of watching prisoners waste away. Tired of what my people have become in this war." She paused, her jaw tight with pain. "My name is Karga. Karga Ironhand of the Bloodfire clan, or I was before tonight. Now I am just Karga, traitor and outcast. Caleb Lawson, farmer and very reluctant soldier." He tied off the bandage, wishing he had proper supplies. "This will hold for now, but you need real medicine, rest, food, none of which we have." Karga tested the binding, then looked at him with those unreadable amber eyes. "You should leave me. I will only slow your escape." "Probably," Caleb agreed, "but I am going to be stubborn about this." "Can you walk? Can you carry me if I cannot?" A definite note of humor that time, though it was brittle with pain. "I grew up hauling sacks of grain that weighed more than both of us combined, so yes, if I have to." He offered his hand, "But let us try walking first." She took his hand, her palm rough with calluses, and let him help her to her feet. She stood a full head taller than him, and even wounded, she radiated a contained power that was both intimidating and oddly reassuring. If they encountered trouble, he suspected she could still fight better than he could on his best day. They moved deeper into the forest, away from the stream that had become too obvious a trail. Karga guided them with the confidence of someone who knew this territory, even as she leaned increasingly on his shoulder for support. As dawn approached, she directed them to a hollow beneath a massive fallen tree where the roots created a natural shelter invisible to casual observation. "We rest here until nightfall," she said, sliding down into the hollow with a barely suppressed groan. "Moving in daylight is suicide." Caleb joined her in the cramped space, suddenly aware of how close they were pressed together. He could feel the heat radiating from her body, hotter than human normal. Fever from the wound or just orc physiology, he had no idea. "Tell me about this farm," Karga said after they had settled into uneasy stillness. Before war, the question surprised him. "Why?" "Because if I focus on pain, I will not rest. And you owe me story for saving your life. Tell me of peaceful things." So Caleb talked. He described Millbrook and the family farm that had been in the Lawson name for 4 generations. He told her about his father's prize breeding bull and his mother's vegetable garden that won ribbons at the autumn fair every year. He spoke of his 2 younger brothers and his sister, and the way the wheat fields looked when the wind moved through them like waves on a golden ocean. Karga listened without interrupting, her breathing gradually evening out into something closer to sleep. When he finally fell silent, she spoke without opening her eyes. "It sounds beautiful, worth fighting for. Is that why your people came south? Looking for land like that? Some seek land. Some seek glory in battle. Some follow chiefs who promise them both." She opened one amber eye to regard him. "I followed because my father was war leader of our clan. I fought because that is what Iron Hands do. But I do not know any more what we are fighting for, only what we are fighting against. And I grow weary of standing against farmers who should be tending their wheat. Yet you defied your people to save one of those farmers. One of 17 I could not save, 16 who still rot in that camp or worse." Her voice turned hard with self-recrimination. "Do not make me a hero, Caleb Lawson. I am barely managing to be less of a monster." "You are not a monster," he said quietly. Monsters do not risk everything for strangers. She closed her eye again. Ask me again when you know me better. Now sleep. I will wake you if danger comes. Despite everything, despite sleeping in a hole next to an orc warrior in enemy territory while being hunted by both her people and his own, Caleb slept. Exhaustion dragged him down into dreamless black, and for the first time in weeks, his sleep was not punctuated by nightmares of the camp. He woke to Karga's hand over his mouth and her body tense beside him. Voices carried through the forest above their hiding spot, guttural and harsh in the orc tongue. She held absolutely still, barely breathing, her other hand gripped around her blade's hilt. The voices drew closer, paused nearly above them, then continued on. They waited in frozen silence for long minutes after the voices faded before Karga finally relaxed her grip. "Patrol," she whispered. "Looking for us. We must move earlier than I hoped." The sun was still high, casting dappled shadows through the canopy when they emerged from their shelter. Karga moved stiffly, one hand pressed to her wounded side, but she set a pace that Caleb struggled to match. They moved roughly south, avoiding game trails and obvious paths, sticking to the difficult terrain where pursuit would be slower. As evening approached, Karga led them to a small clearing beside a spring. "We stop here. I must check your work on my wound." While she unwrapped the makeshift bandage, Caleb foraged at the clearing's edge, finding cattails by the spring and a patch of mushrooms he recognized from his farm days. Not much, but better than nothing. When he returned, Karga had rebound her wound and was attempting to start a fire with her flint and knife. "Let me," he said, kneeling beside her. "You should rest that side." She moved aside without argument, which worried him more than protest would have. He got a small fire going, shielded by rocks to minimize the visible smoke, and set about preparing the cattail roots and mushrooms. The food was bland and barely filled the hollow in his belly, but Karga ate her share without complaint. "You know plants," she observed. "This is farmer knowledge." "My mother insisted we learn to identify everything that grew wild on the property. Said you never knew when a bad harvest might mean the difference between surviving and starving." He fed another small stick to the fire. "I never thought I would use that knowledge to survive a war." "War makes use of all skills," Karga shifted, wincing slightly. "I was trained from childhood in weapons and tactics. I can track prey through any terrain. I know 17 ways to kill a man with my bare hands. But I cannot start a proper fire or identify safe food or grow anything that does not involve blood and steel." She stared into the small flames. "My skills are becoming obsolete in my own estimation. You got us this far alive. I would say your skills remain valuable. For now. But wars end, Caleb Lawson. And when they do, what use is a warrior who knows only war?" The question hung between them, unanswerable in the firelight. Caleb found himself studying her face, the strong lines of jaw and cheekbone, the way the firelight caught in her dark braids and made her green skin seem almost to glow. She was beautiful in a way that defied his previous understanding of the word, not despite her differences, but because of them. "Tell me about your family," he said, partly to distract himself from that realization. "Your father, the war leader." Karga's expression grew distant. "He died at Hollowbrook Ridge, the same battle where you were captured. He led the charge that broke your lines." She said it without pride or shame, simply stating fact. "My brother Gruck now leads the Bloodfire clan. He is the one who ordered I be executed for treason when he discovered I freed you. Gruck believes in absolute loyalty and absolute victory. There is no room in his vision for mercy. I am sorry." "About your father," she looked at him with surprise. "He killed your friends, led the attack that made you prisoner. And he was still your father. You are allowed to mourn him." Caleb poked at the fire. My best friend died at that battle. Marcus Chen. We grew up together, enlisted together. He took an arrow meant for me in the first charge. I am angry about that. I will probably always be angry about that. But I can also understand that your father believed he was fighting for something important, same as Marcus did. War makes enemies of people who might otherwise have been friends. Karga studied him for a long moment. You are strange, Caleb Lawson. Most humans I have met want only to see orcs dead. Most orcs I have met want the same for humans. But you are here, wounded and outcast because you chose differently. Maybe there are more strange people on both sides than either of us realized. They sat in comfortable silence until the fire burned down to embers. When full darkness settled over the forest, Karga stood with visible effort and kicked dirt over the coals. We moved through the night. The border is still 3 days away, and my people will have trackers following us by now. Rest is a luxury we cannot afford. The next 2 days blurred into an exhausting routine of walking through the night and hiding during daylight hours. They survived on foraged food and spring water, always moving south, always alert for pursuit. Karga's wound showed signs of infection despite Caleb's efforts to keep it clean. Her skin grew hot to the touch, and she developed a cough that worried him more than she would admit. On the 3rd night she collapsed. One moment she was walking ahead of him through the dark forest, the next she was on her knees, unable to rise despite her obvious efforts. Caleb caught her before she pitched forward into the underbrush. No, she muttered, her voice thick. Cannot stop. Must keep moving. You are burning with fever, we have to rest. Trackers will find us. Brother will not stop until I am dead and you are recaptured. She tried to stand and failed, her strength finally exhausted. Leave me. You are close enough to the border now, you can make it alone. We have established that I am too stubborn for that. Caleb looked around, desperate. They were in hilly country now, the forest giving way to rocky outcroppings. In the moonlight he spotted what might be a cave entrance in the hillside 50 yards off. Can you walk that far? Getting her to the cave took most of his remaining strength. It was barely more than a deep cleft in the rock, but it was shelter, and it was hidden from casual view. He settled Karga against the back wall and went to gather what he needed. The wound had definitely become infected, the flesh around it hot and angry red beneath her green skin. He needed proper medicine, bandages, and about a dozen things he did not have. What he did have was stream water, the last scraps of his uniform to tear into clean strips, and a childhood memory of his mother treating his father's leg wound after a farming accident. He built a small fire at the cave's mouth, using the smoke to help mask their location while he heated water. Through the long night he worked, cleaning and rebandaging the wound, forcing Karga to drink when she was lucid enough to swallow, and talking to her through the periods when fever made her delirious. In her delirium, she spoke in the orc tongue, words he could not understand but whose emotion was clear. She sounded young and frightened, calling out names that might have been family or friends. When he laid a cool cloth on her forehead, she gripped his hand with desperate strength. I do not want to die, she said in human speech, her amber eyes unfocused. Not yet, not before I see what peace looks like. You are not going to die, Caleb promised, knowing he had no right to make such a promise but making it anyway. I did not haul you this far just to lose you to infection. You are going to survive this, Karga Ironhand. Not Ironhand anymore, just Karga, just me. Then just Karga is going to survive this. Dawn came and went. The fever raged through the day, but as evening approached it finally broke. Karga's skin cooled and her breathing eased into natural sleep. Caleb allowed himself to sleep as well, his hand still held in hers. He woke to find her watching him with clear eyes. You are terrible at following sensible advice, she said, her voice weak but lucid. It is a character flaw. How do you feel? Like I was trampled by a war boar, but alive. She looked down at their joined hands, seemed to realize they were still clasped together but did not pull away. You should have left me. So you keep saying, I am going to keep ignoring you. Why? The question was quiet, genuinely curious. I am your enemy. My people held you prisoner, beat you, starved you. Why risk yourself for me? Caleb considered the question, aware that his answer mattered more than the words alone might suggest. Because you saw me. In that camp, when I was just one more prisoner among many, you saw me as a person worth saving. You risked everything for that. How could I do less for you? That is not a good reason. That is sentiment, maybe. But sentiment kept me human in that camp when it would have been easier to give up. Sentiment got me here. Sentiment is why I can still tell right from wrong. He met her amber gaze steadily. You are a good person, Karga. I am not going to apologize for wanting good people to survive. She studied his face for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she squeezed his hand once before releasing it. You are very strange, Caleb Lawson. So I have been told. They rested in the cave for 2 more days while Karga regained her strength. Caleb foraged for food and kept watch, alert for signs of pursuit. On the 2nd day, he spotted smoke on the northern horizon. Orc war parties, still searching. But they seemed to be moving east, away from their position. When Karga could walk without swaying, they set out again. The terrain had grown more familiar to Caleb, the hills and forests matching maps he had studied during his military training. They were close to the border now, maybe a day's travel from the southern watchtowers, where human forces maintained their defensive line. But as they drew closer to safety, Caleb found himself slowing down. Each mile brought them nearer to the moment when he would have to part from Karga, and the prospect sat like a stone in his chest. She seemed to feel it too. They walked in silence through the autumn forest, the easy conversation of previous days replaced by an awareness of approaching endings. It was Karga who finally spoke what they were both thinking. When we reach your lines, I cannot go with you, I know. Your people would kill me on sight, or capture me as you were captured. Either way, it ends badly. I know, Caleb repeated, the words bitter in his mouth. They stopped at a stream to refill their water skins, and Karga turned to face him directly. What happens after this, Caleb Lawson? You return to your people. You go back to your war, or perhaps to your farm if you are lucky. And I go where exactly? I am outcast from my clan. I have no people anymore. Come with me. The words surprised him as much as they clearly surprised her, but once spoken, he realized he meant them absolutely. Come with me, he said again, more firmly. Not to the military camps, but to my home, to Millbrook. You said you wanted to see what peace looked like. Let me show you. Your people would never accept an orc among them. Then they can learn, or they can be unhappy about it. I do not particularly care which. He reached out, gently taking her hand. You saved my life, Karga. You gave up everything you knew to do the right thing. That makes you exactly the kind of person my home needs, the kind of person I need. You would take me to your family, knowing what I am. I would take you to my family because of what you are, a warrior who chose peace. A woman of honor who valued life over loyalty to a war she did not believe in. He paused, trying to find words for feelings he barely understood himself. And because somewhere between that prison camp and this moment, you became important to me, more important than I have words to explain. Karga stared at him, her amber eyes wide with something that looked like hope and terror mixed together. You do not know what you are asking. The prejudice, the danger, the way people will look at you for harboring an orc. I grew up a farmer in a world that valued warriors. I know about being looked at funny. He squeezed her hand. And I am asking anyway. Come home with me, Karga, please." For a long moment she did not answer. Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his, a gesture he did not understand but which felt profoundly intimate. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will come with you, though you are a fool for asking and I am a greater fool for accepting. Then we can be fools together." They reached the border at twilight 2 days later. The human watchtower rose above the forest canopy, its banner visible from a mile away. But rather than approaching directly, Caleb led them east along the border for several more hours, until they reached a section he remembered from his initial march north, a logging road that crossed the frontier and led to a small civilian settlement called Woodhaven. "Less military presence," he explained. "Fewer questions if we come through with the lumber wagons." They waited until a convoy of timber haulers passed, then joined the end of the line, 2 more tired travelers among many. The border guards gave them cursory glances but waved them through without incident. One guard's eyes lingered on Karga, his expression uncertain, but a loaded wagon behind them demanded his attention, and the moment passed. Just like that, they were in human territory. Karga's hand found his as they walked away from the checkpoint, her grip tight enough to hurt. He squeezed back, a silent promise that he was not going to abandon her now. The journey south to Millbrook took 8 days of hard walking along merchant roads and farm tracks. They kept to smaller paths, avoiding large towns where Karga's presence would draw attention. The few people they did encounter reacted with shock or suspicion, but no one challenged them directly. Caleb's military bearing and confident manner seemed to provide enough authority to forestall questions. They survived on day labor at farms along the way, Caleb offering his strength for harvesting work and Karga proving she could haul loads that would have required 2 men. Most farmers were too focused on bringing in their crops before frost to care much about the unusual nature of their help. They paid in food and shelter, and Caleb and Karga moved on before suspicion could settle into action. In the evenings, camped beside the road, they talked. Karga told him about orc culture, the clan structures and the honor codes that governed her people. She spoke of the Bloodfire clan's history, of her father's belief that orcs needed to expand or die, of her own gradual disillusionment with the war. Caleb shared more about his family, his voice growing animated as he described his mother's fierce love and his father's quiet wisdom. He talked about growing up in Millbrook, about the rhythm of the seasons and the satisfaction of coaxing food from the earth. "You speak of it like prayer," Karga observed one evening as they watched the sun set over farmland. "This connection to the land. Maybe it is prayer, or maybe it is just knowing your place in the world." He glanced at her. "Do orcs not feel that connection to where they come from?" "We feel connection to clan, to family, to battle brothers and sisters. But land," she shook her head slowly. "We are nomadic by nature. We move with the seasons, following game and war. I have never planted a seed and watched it grow. I have never harvested what I myself worked to create." "Then I will teach you. When we get home, you can help with the winter wheat. It is hard work, but there is something satisfying about it, something that lasts. If your family does not kill me on sight, they will not. They are good people." He hoped he sounded more confident than he felt. "And you are with me. That will count for something." As they drew closer to Millbrook, Caleb's anxiety grew. He had been gone for months, first to war and then to captivity. His family would have received notice that he was missing, probably presumed dead. His arrival would be shock enough. His arrival with an orc woman would be something else entirely. They reached the outskirts of Millbrook on a bright autumn morning. The familiar sight of the grain mill that gave the town its name brought a lump to Caleb's throat. Home. He was actually home. But Karga had stopped at the edge of the tree line, her face tight with apprehension. "Perhaps I should wait here. Let you speak to your family first." "We do this together," Caleb said firmly. "You are not hiding in the woods like you are ashamed. You saved my life and you chose to trust me. I am not repaying that by making you wait in the shadows." They walked into town side by side, and it did not take long for people to notice. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Shutters opened as word spread. By the time they reached the main street, a crowd had gathered, their expressions ranging from shock to hostility. "Is that Caleb Lawson?" someone called out. "It is, but who is that with him?" "That is an orc. What is an orc doing here?" Caleb kept walking, his hand finding Karga's and holding tight. She walked with her head high, her expression neutral, but he could feel the tension in her grip. They were 3 streets from the Lawson farm when Caleb's mother appeared, running down the road with her skirts hiked up and tears streaming down her face. She crashed into him with enough force to nearly knock him over, sobbing his name over and over. "Caleb, oh my boy, we thought you were dead. The notice said missing, presumed killed. Oh, thank the merciful heavens you are alive." "I am all right, mother. I am home." He held her tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender soap and baking bread that meant safety and love. "I am sorry I worried you." His mother pulled back, cupping his face in her hands, her tear-filled eyes cataloging every injury and hardship written on his features. Then her gaze shifted to Karga, and her expression transformed from joy to incomprehension. "Caleb, who is this?" "This is Karga. She saved my life." He kept his voice steady, aware that the gathered crowd was listening to every word. "I was captured after Hollowbrook Ridge, held prisoner for weeks. Karga freed me at great cost to herself. She is the reason I am standing here." His mother looked from him to Karga and back again, processing this information. Then, to Caleb's profound relief, she stepped forward and took Karga's hand in both of hers. "Then you are welcome in our home, child. Anyone who brought my son back to me is family." The tension in Karga's shoulders eased fractionally. "You honor me, mother of Caleb, Elena. My name is Elena. Come, both of you. You look half-starved." She turned to the gathered crowd with a fierce expression Caleb remembered from his childhood, the look that meant she was prepared to fight anyone who challenged her children. "The rest of you can mind your own business. Go on now, shoo." The crowd dispersed slowly, muttering among themselves. Caleb caught fragments of conversation, most of it skeptical or suspicious, but no one made any threatening moves. Small victories. His father was in the barn when they arrived at the farm, and his reunion with Caleb was more reserved but no less emotional. Thomas Lawson clasped his son in a fierce embrace, then held him at arm's length to examine him properly. "You have been through hell," he said simply, "but you made it back. That is what matters. Father, this is Karga. She is the reason I survived." Thomas looked at Karga with the same measuring gaze he turned on livestock and weather and all things requiring careful assessment. Then he extended his hand. "Thomas Lawson, pleased to meet anyone with the sense to keep my son alive." Karga shook his hand carefully, clearly aware of her greater strength. He made it difficult, very stubborn. "That is a family trait, I am afraid." Thomas almost smiled. "You look tired, both of you. Elena, let us get them fed and settled." Caleb's younger brothers, Peter and John, were more wary. At 16 and 14, respectively, they had grown up on stories of orc raids and battlefield horrors. They kept their distance, watching Karga with undisguised suspicion. His sister Martha, nearly 12, hid behind their mother and stared with huge eyes. The first few days were awkward. The family gave Karga the guest room and treated her with cautious courtesy, but the tension was obvious. Peter and John spoke to her only when necessary. Martha would not look at her directly. Even his parents, despite their initial acceptance, clearly did not know what to make of the situation. For her part, Karga handled the awkwardness with quiet dignity. She helped with chores, proving capable with tasks from hauling firewood to repairing fence posts. She was unfailingly polite and kept to herself when not needed. But Caleb could see the toll it took on her. The way she tensed whenever one of his family members entered a room, the way her hand sometimes strayed to where her blade would have hung if she still carried weapons. On the fourth evening, Caleb found her sitting alone by the pig pen watching the sunset. He sat beside her on the fence rail, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I am sorry," he said. "I know this is not easy. They do not trust me. I do not blame them. I would not trust me either in their position." She was quiet for a moment. "Perhaps I should go, find somewhere else." "Where would you go? You have no clan and most human settlements would be worse than this." He turned to face her. "Give them time, Karga, they will come around." "You cannot know that. I know my family. They are good people who have been taught to fear orcs their whole lives, but they can learn different. You just have to give them a chance to see who you really are." Karga looked at him, her amber eyes reflecting the sunset. "And who am I really, Caleb Lawson? You are brave, honorable, kind beneath all that warrior training. You are someone who gave up everything for what was right." He reached over and took her hand. "And you are important to me. More important than I realized until I thought I might lose you to that infection." She studied their joined hands. "Your people already whisper about the farmer boy who brought an orc home. If they knew you felt this way about me, it would be worse. Then let them whisper. I stopped caring what people thought when I was rotting in that prison camp." He squeezed her hand. "I care what you think, though, about me, about this." "I think you are still a fool," she said softly, "but you are my fool if you want to be." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She did not pull away. Their lips met in a kiss that was tentative and sweet and held promise of more. When they parted, she was smiling, a real smile that transformed her face into something radiant. "Yes," she said. "Definitely my fool." The turning point with his family came a week later, during the first serious frost. Caleb and his father were working to bring the cattle in from the far pasture when one of the heifers, heavy with calf, went down in a ditch. She had slipped on the frost-slick grass and twisted her leg, and she bellowed in pain and fear. They tried to help her up, but the heifer was young and panicked, thrashing dangerously. Thomas stepped back, breathing hard. "We need more help. Peter and John are in the south field. By the time I fetch them." "Let me try," Karga said. She had followed them out to help with the herding, and now she approached the downed heifer with calm confidence. "I have seen frightened animals before." She knelt beside the heifer, heedless of the mud and the animal's flailing hooves, and began to speak in a low, rhythmic voice. The words were in the orc tongue, flowing and harsh sounding to human ears, but somehow soothing in their cadence. The heifer's bellowing quieted to frightened huffs. Karga kept talking, one hand stroking the animal's neck, the other carefully examining the twisted leg. "Not broken," she announced. "Just wrenched. But she is stuck in this position. If we can lift her clear of the ditch, she will be able to stand." Between the three of them, they managed to maneuver the heifer out of the ditch and onto solid ground. True to Karga's assessment, once free, the animal struggled to her feet and limped away, favoring the injured leg but mobile. Thomas watched the heifer go, then turned to Karga with newfound respect in his eyes. "That was well done. How did you know what to do? My clan bred war boars for riding and transport. I grew up caring for them. Frightened animals are the same whether they are cattle or boars. You must make them feel safe before you can help them." She wiped mud from her hands. "She will need rest and careful watching, The calf may come early from the stress. Then we will watch her. Thank you, Karga." That evening at dinner, Thomas related the story to the rest of the family. Caleb watched his siblings' faces as their father described Karga's calm handling of the situation. Peter looked thoughtful. Martha actually smiled. The next morning, Martha approached Karga in the kitchen where she was helping Alina with breakfast preparation. Caleb, coming in from his morning chores, stopped in the doorway to watch. "Miss Karga," Martha's voice was small but determined. "Could you teach me that song you were singing to the cow? It was pretty." Karga looked surprised, then pleased. "It is not exactly a song, more of a calming chant. But yes, I can teach you." She began to hum the melody, then added words, translating as she went. Martha listened intently, then tried to repeat it, stumbling over the unfamiliar sounds. Karga corrected her gently, and they went through it again together. Alina caught Caleb's eye and smiled. "Progress," that smile said. Small but real. Over the following weeks, Karga became a true part of the household. She worked alongside Caleb and his father in the fields, preparing for winter. She helped Alina with preserving food and managing the household. She taught Martha orc chants, and even began teaching Peter and John some basic self-defense techniques, which they approached with teenage enthusiasm once they got past their initial wariness. The town was slower to accept her. Some people remained hostile, refusing to deal with the Lawson farm as long as that orc lived there. But others, pragmatic or simply curious, gradually warmed to her presence. When she helped the blacksmith repair his forge roof, a job that would have required 3 men but which she managed with just Caleb's help, word spread. When she delivered the heifer's calf single-handedly after a difficult birth, saving both mother and baby, more people took notice. She was not human, and most of the town never entirely forgot that. But she was competent and hardworking and unfailingly polite, and eventually that mattered more than her green skin and tusks. For Caleb, those weeks were a revelation. He had come home expecting to return to the life he had known before the war, but everything felt different now. The farm was the same, his family was the same, but he had changed. The things that had mattered before, the simple certainties of rural life, felt insufficient now. Or perhaps it was not that they felt insufficient, but that he wanted more than just the life he had known. He wanted Karga in it. They were walking through the orchard one evening in late autumn, checking the last of the apple harvest, when he finally put words to what he had been feeling. "Stay with me," he said. "Not just for the winter, not just until you figure out what comes next. Stay with me for all of it, whatever comes." Karga paused in examining an apple tree, her back to him. "You are asking me to make Millbrook my home. I am asking you to make me your home. The location is just geography." She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Your people barely tolerate me, Caleb. Imagine how they would react if we were actually together, as partners, as more. Some would react badly, some already do." He closed the distance between them. "But some would accept it. And the ones who matter most, my family, are already coming around. Martha adores you. Peter and John think you are the most capable person they have ever met aside from Father. Mother trusts you with her kitchen. And Father," he smiled. "Father asked me last week what my intentions toward you were, in those exact words." "What did you tell him?" "That I am madly, completely, hopelessly in love with you, and if you will have me, I intend to spend the rest of my life proving that was the smartest decision you ever made." Karga stared at him, her amber eyes wide. "You love me. Of course I love you. How could I not? You are fierce and brave and kind. You make me laugh. You challenge me to be better than I thought I could be. You chose mercy over loyalty and peace over war. You are everything good in this world, Karga." He took her hands in his. And I know I am just a farmer with no prospects beyond these fields, and you are a warrior from a proud clan, and we should not work on paper. But I do not care about paper. I care about you. So yes, I love you. Completely." She was silent for a long moment, her thumbs tracing circles on the backs of his hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "I did not know I could feel like this. My people do not speak often of love. We speak of duty and honor and battle bonds. But this—" She pressed one of his hands over her heart. "This is more than duty. This is choosing you every day, every moment above all else. If that is love, then yes, I love you too, Caleb Lawson." He kissed her there in the apple orchard under the autumn sky, and it felt like coming home after a long journey. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling. "So you will stay? Permanently?" "I will stay, though your father is going to have questions about proper courting procedures." She sounded amused. "I suspect orc and human traditions are quite different in that regard. Then we will make our own traditions, ones that work for us." They walked back to the farmhouse hand in hand, and when they told his family, there were smiles all around. Even Peter and John seemed genuinely happy, though Peter did mention something about Caleb being thoroughly odd for falling in love with an orc warrior. "Better odd than boring," Caleb replied, pulling Karga close. She laughed, the sound bright and free, and he thought there was no better sound in the world. Winter came to Millbrook in swirls of snow and biting cold. The farm settled into its seasonal rhythm of maintenance and indoor work. Karga proved invaluable during the harsh months, her greater strength making tasks like hauling firewood and clearing snow far easier. But more than her physical capabilities, she brought laughter and new perspectives to the long winter evenings. She taught the family orc stories around the fire, tales of ancient heroes and clever tricksters that held Peter, John, and Martha spellbound. She sparred with Caleb in the barn, teaching him fighting techniques that amazed his father. She learned to cook human dishes from Alina, trading recipes for orc trail food that proved surprisingly good. And in the quiet moments when the work was done and the family had gone to bed, Caleb and Karga would sit together by the fire and plan for the future. They talked about expanding the farm, about maybe starting a horse breeding program since Karga had experience with large animals. They talked about eventually building their own house on the property, a place that would be entirely theirs. On the winter solstice, the longest night of the year, Caleb asked her to marry him. They were alone in the barn, tending to the animals before bed, when he pulled out the ring he had commissioned from the town silversmith. It was simple, a plain silver band engraved with wheat stalks on one side and orc clan symbols on the other, representing both their cultures. "Karga, would you marry me?" he asked, holding out the ring. "Would you be my wife and let me be your husband and let us build a life together here?" She looked at the ring, then at him, her amber eyes shining with tears. "Yes, yes, of course yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, and she pulled him into a kiss that spoke of promises and futures and love that transcended the boundaries of species and culture. They married in early spring, as soon as the ground thawed enough for travelers to make the journey. It was a small ceremony, attended by Caleb's family and a handful of open-minded neighbors. The local priest had refused to perform the ceremony, calling it unnatural, but Thomas found a traveling chaplain passing through who agreed to bless the union. Karga wore a simple dress Alina had helped her sew human style, but in colors that echoed orc traditions, deep red and burnt orange. Caleb wore his best clothes, his father's wedding vest that had been saved for this purpose. They stood together in the farmhouse parlor, hands clasped, and spoke vows they had written themselves. "I vow to honor you," Caleb said, "to stand beside you in joy and hardship." to build a home where you are safe and valued, to love you for exactly who you are every day of my life." "I vow to protect you," Karga replied, "to be your partner in all things, to tend the peace we have found together, to love you with the strength of my whole heart from this day until my last." When the chaplain pronounced them married, the small gathering cheered. Martha threw dried flower petals, Peter and John clapped loudly, and Helena dabbed tears from her eyes. Thomas clasped both their shoulders and said simply, "Welcome to the family, daughter." The celebration was modest, a meal shared among friends and family, but it was perfect in its simplicity. As evening fell and the guests departed, Caleb and Karga walked out to the orchard together, to the spot where he had first told her he loved her. "Are you happy?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. She leaned back against him, solid and warm. "I did not know I could be this happy. I thought my life would be war and wandering. But this—" she gestured at the farm spread out before them, the house with light glowing in the windows. "This is everything I did not know to want." "We will have challenges ahead," Caleb said honestly. "There will always be people who cannot accept us. The war is still happening beyond our borders. Nothing about this will be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is." She turned in his arms to face him. "But we will face it together. Whatever comes, we face it together." "Together," he agreed, and kissed his wife under the apple blossoms, surrounded by the life they had chosen to build. The first year of marriage brought all the adjustments any couple faced, compounded by the additional complexities of their different backgrounds. Karga had to learn human social niceties that baffled her warrior's directness. Caleb had to understand orc concepts of honor and personal space that did not always align with human expectations. They argued about everything from how to properly season food to whether it was acceptable to spar with real blades in the barnyard. But they learned. They compromised. They found middle ground between warrior culture and farming life. Karga took to agriculture with the same focused intensity she had once brought to combat training. She studied crop rotation and soil management with Thomas, asking endless questions and implementing improvements. Her idea to irrigate the east field from the creek increased their yield by nearly a third. Her strength meant they could break ground on previously unusable land, expanding their productive acreage. Caleb, for his part, learned orc customs and language. Karga taught him the chants she had learned as a child, the battle songs and the mourning songs and the celebration songs. She taught him to fight properly, moving beyond the basic military training he had received. Not because they expected to need such skills, but because it was part of her heritage, and she wanted to share it with him. The town gradually grew accustomed to them as a couple. The sight of Caleb and Karga working side by side in the fields became normal. When they came to town for supplies, fewer people stared. The children stopped pointing and started waving. There were still incidents. A merchant from a neighboring town refused to sell to them and called Karga a monster to her face. A group of drunk farmhands harassed them outside the tavern one night, throwing insults until Thomas and several neighbors intervened. A traveling preacher stood in the town square and delivered a sermon condemning their union as an affront to nature. Each incident hurt. But each incident also showed them who their true friends were, the neighbors who stood up for them, the merchants who continued to do business with them, the families who invited them to community gatherings despite the controversy. By their second anniversary, Karga was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure. Half-human, half-orc children were not unheard of in the broader world, but they were rare and often faced even worse prejudice than their parents. Caleb worried about whether their child would be accepted. Karga worried about the pregnancy itself. Orc births were difficult even under the best circumstances, and she had no access to orc midwives who understood the process. But Alina stepped in with calm confidence, declaring that birth was birth regardless of the mother's species, and she had delivered enough calves and foals to handle most complications. She consulted with Karga about orc pregnancy traditions and adapted them to their circumstances. The pregnancy progressed without major complications. Karga remained active through most of it, refusing to be treated as fragile despite Caleb's attempts to pamper her. She worked the fields until her 8th month, only stopping when she could no longer comfortably bend over. Their son was born on a hot summer evening, his arrival announced by Karga's bellows that echoed across the farm and sent Caleb pacing anxiously outside the bedroom. Alina and Martha attended the birth, and when Caleb was finally allowed in, he found Karga exhausted but radiant, holding a squirming baby with skin a softer green than hers and tiny tusks barely visible. "Our son," Karga said softly, offering the baby to Caleb. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months but never quite settled on one. Now, looking at his son's face, Caleb knew exactly what felt right. "Connor," he said. "Connor Lawson. A strong name for a strong boy." "Connor," Karga repeated, testing the sound. "Yes, it is good." Connor was a healthy baby, loud and demanding and absolutely perfect. He had his mother's coloring and his father's eyes, a blend of both worlds. As he grew, his personality emerged as a mix of orcish stubbornness and human curiosity. The reaction from the town was mixed, as they had expected. Some people thought Connor was adorable. Others saw him as proof of unnatural mixing. But the Lawson family closed ranks around him, protective and fierce. Thomas and Alina doted on their grandson. Peter and John took turns watching him and teaching him things far too advanced for a baby. Martha sang him lullabies and sewed him tiny clothes. When Connor was 6 months old, an official delegation arrived from the regional governor. Caleb's heart sank when he saw the formal carriages coming up the road. Official attention was rarely good attention for people in their situation. But the delegation's purpose surprised him. The governor himself stepped out of the carriage, a distinguished older man with gray hair and shrewd eyes. He surveyed the farm, then Caleb and Karga, who stood together on the porch, baby Connor in Karga's arms. "Caleb Lawson," the governor said. "And this must be Karga. I have heard much about you both." "Governor," Caleb replied carefully, "what brings you to our farm? Good news, I hope." The governor smiled. "The war ended 3 weeks ago. A treaty has been signed. Orc clans and human settlements are to maintain a permanent peace, with trade and diplomatic relations established." Caleb felt Karga's hand find his, squeezing tight. "Peace. After all these years, actual peace. That is wonderful news, Governor, but I am not sure how it relates to us specifically." "Because you two are living proof that such peace is possible," the governor said. "Your marriage, your family, it is exactly the kind of bridge between our peoples that the treaty envisions. I am here to ask if you would be willing to serve as cultural ambassadors, to help other humans and orcs navigate this new relationship." Caleb looked at Karga, seeing his own surprise reflected in her amber eyes. "Ambassador is a big word for a farmer and a former warrior. Perhaps. But you have something no career diplomat has: genuine experience living together, building a life together, making it work despite all the obstacles." The governor gestured at the farm around them. "This is what peace looks like in practice. That knowledge is valuable." "What exactly would this involve?" Karga asked, her voice cautious. "Traveling to communities on both sides of the former border, sharing your story, helping mediate disputes between humans and orcs who are trying to learn to coexist, advising on integration policies." The governor paused. It would be difficult work. Not everyone wants peace, and there will be those who hate you for trying to build it. But the pay is good, and you would be doing something genuinely important. Caleb and Karga looked at each other for a long moment, an entire conversation passing between them without words. Then Karga turned to the governor. "We will need time to discuss this, and to arrange care for our son and the farm. Of course, take a week to consider. I will return then for your answer." After the governor left, they sat on the porch watching Connor play with his toes on a blanket between them. "What do you think?" Caleb asked. "I think it sounds terrifying and difficult and important," Karga said slowly. "I also think it might be exactly what we are meant to do. We have built something good here, Caleb. Maybe we can help others build good things too. It would mean leaving the farm regularly, traveling into potentially dangerous situations, facing hostility on both sides. So nothing we have not already experienced." She smiled, that fierce, bright smile that still made his heart skip. "Except this time we would be doing it with official backing and the chance to make real change. You want to do this? I want to try, if you are willing." Caleb looked out at the farm his grandfather had built, the land his father had maintained, the home he had thought he would spend his whole life working. It was a good life, a peaceful life. But Karga was right, they had something rare and valuable, knowledge born of genuine experience. "Yes," he said, "let us try. We will keep the farm as our base, work it when we can and hire help when we cannot. But if we can help build this peace, make it real for more than just us, then that is worth doing." When the governor returned a week later, they accepted his offer. The next 2 years were chaotic and exhausting and deeply fulfilling. They traveled constantly, sometimes together and sometimes separately as their work demanded. They met with orc clan leaders and human town councils. They helped negotiate trade agreements and mediate disputes. They spoke at gatherings, sharing their story again and again, wearing their love and their family as proof that the old hatreds could be overcome. It was not always successful. Some communities refused to listen, some actively hostile. Caleb nearly got stabbed by a human supremacist in one town. Karga was attacked by a group of orc traditionalists who saw her as a traitor in another. But they kept working, kept trying, kept showing up to speak their truth. And slowly, incrementally, things improved. Trade routes opened. Mixed communities began to form. More interspecies marriages occurred, though they remained rare and controversial. The peace held, fragile but growing stronger with each passing season. Through it all, Connor grew. He took his first steps in the governor's mansion garden during a diplomatic reception. He spoke his first word, "Mama," during a negotiation session, breaking the tension and making both sides laugh. He became a fixture at peace talks, the living symbol of what they were all working toward. On Connor's 3rd birthday, Caleb and Karga decided to step back from the ambassador work. They had given 3 years to building the peace, and now they wanted to focus on raising their son and rebuilding the farm that had been somewhat neglected during their travels. The governor understood and thanked them for their service. Others would continue the work they had started. But they had laid the foundation, created the template. That would be their legacy. They returned to Millbrook permanently that autumn in time for harvest. The farm had survived their absences, maintained by Thomas with help from Peter, who had grown into a capable young man. John had left to apprentice with a merchant in a neighboring town, and Martha had married a local boy and moved to a farm nearby. Settling back into farm life felt like sliding into a familiar coat, comfortable and right. Caleb threw himself into the work with renewed energy, determined to restore the fields to their previous productivity. Karga balanced farm work with caring for Connor, teaching him about both his human and orc heritage. They were in the orchard one evening, Connor helping pick apples by mostly eating them when Karga spoke. "I am pregnant again." Caleb dropped the apple he was holding. "What? Really, really? About 8 weeks along, I think." She smiled, one hand resting on her still flat stomach. Connor is about to be a big brother. Joy flooded through him, bright and overwhelming. "That is amazing. You are amazing. This is." He swept her into his arms, careful despite his enthusiasm. "This is wonderful." Their daughter arrived the following spring, a howling bundle of energy they named Clara. She had Caleb's brown hair and Karga's green skin, and from day one she was fearless. Where Connor had been a cautious baby, Clara threw herself at the world with abandon. Raising 2 children while maintaining the farm required all their time and energy. The next few years passed in a blur of milestones and daily routines. Connor started helping with chores, learning to feed chickens and collect eggs. Clara followed her brother everywhere, determined to do everything he could do despite being years younger. The children grew up in a world very different from the one Caleb and Karga had known. The peace held and strengthened. Orc and human children attended school together in Millbrook's expanded schoolhouse. Mixed-species families became more common, though still remarkable. The prejudice did not disappear, it never fully would, but it faded into background noise rather than active hostility. When Connor was 10 and Clara 7, Karga's brother Gruck came to the farm. Caleb answered the door to find a massive orc warrior standing on their porch, scars crossing his face and arms bearing the marks of a clan war leader. His first instinct was to slam the door and grab his hunting rifle. His second instinct, which won out, was to call for Karga. She came to the door, froze, then slowly stepped outside. "Gruck, sister." His voice was deep, roughened by years of shouting battle commands. "You are difficult to find when you wish to be." That was intentional. "You wanted me dead last time we met. I wanted many things then that I no longer want." Gruck looked past her to where Caleb stood in the doorway, then to where Connor and Clara peeked around their father's legs. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. "These are your children. They are." "Connor and Clara," Karga's voice was cautious. "Why are you here, Gruck, to say I was wrong, about you, about the war, about everything?" He reached into his belt and pulled out a carved stone token, holding it out to her. "The Bloodfire clan welcomes you home if you wish to return. As my sister. As the war leader's sister. With your family, if they will come." Karga took the token slowly, studying it. Caleb recognized it as an orc reconciliation symbol from his time as ambassador. This was no small gesture. This was Gruck publicly acknowledging his past errors and offering full restoration. "I am honored," Karga said carefully, "but my home is here now, with my husband and children. I am Bloodfire in heritage, but I am Lawson in practice. I understand. I do not ask you to choose. I ask only that you know the path back to us remains open should you ever wish to walk it." Gruck paused. "And I ask forgiveness. I called you traitor. I ordered your death. I was a fool. You were a warrior in wartime. We all did things in that war we regret." Karga stepped forward and clasped her brother's forearm in the orc manner. "You are forgiven. And welcome here, if you wish to stay and know your niece and nephew." Gruck stayed 3 days. He was awkward around the children at first, unused to anything small and vulnerable. But Clara's fearlessness won him over. She demanded he teach her orc fighting stances, and he spent hours in the yard showing her basic forms while she mimicked him with intense concentration. Connor asked him endless questions about clan life and orc history, and Gruck answered with surprising patience. When he left, he clasped Karga's shoulder and said, "You built something good here, sister. Father would be proud, I think, despite everything." After he was gone, Karga stood in the yard for a long time, clutching the reconciliation token. Caleb came up beside her and took her hand. "Are you all right?" "Yes, I think so." She looked at him with shining eyes. "I did not know how much that wound still ached until it was healed. I thought I had made peace with losing my clan, but having them back, even just the possibility of them back." She trailed off, unable to find words. "You do not have to choose," Caleb said gently. "You can be Bloodfire and Lawson. You can be orc and part of a human family. You can be all the things you are without giving up any of them." "How did I get so lucky as to find you?" she murmured. "We found each other. Neither of us were particularly lucky. We were desperate and fleeing and broken. But we chose to build something from that. That is not luck. That is work and choice and love." She leaned into him, and they stood together in the yard as their children played, as the farm stretched out around them, as the life they had built together continued on. The years rolled forward in the way years do, marked by harvests and birthdays and small victories and occasional setbacks. The farm prospered. The children grew strong and healthy, walking easily between their two heritages. Connor developed his father's thoughtful nature and his mother's physical prowess. Clara combined fierce stubbornness with surprising diplomatic skill, traits that came from both parents. When Connor turned 18, he announced his intention to join the United Peacekeeping Force that now patrolled the border regions, human and orc soldiers working side by side. Caleb's immediate reaction was panic. He had fought in a war and knew what violence looked like. But Karga placed a hand on his arm and nodded to their son. "You raised him to believe in the peace," she said quietly. "Let him help maintain it." So Connor went off to training, tall and proud in his uniform, and Caleb tried not to count the days until his letters arrived. Clara announced she wanted to become a teacher, specifically to work with mixed-species children who sometimes struggled to fit in either world. Alina helped her apply to the new teachers' college in the provincial capital, and at 16, Clara left home for education. The house felt too quiet with both children gone, but Caleb and Karga adjusted, finding new rhythms for just the two of them. They expanded the farm's breeding program for horses, combining Caleb's agricultural knowledge with Karga's experience with large animals. Their horses became known throughout the region for strength and even temperament. On their 20th wedding anniversary, they returned to the spot in the orchard where Caleb had first proposed. The trees were older now, thick and gnarled, producing the best apples in the county. They sat under the blossoms in the spring evening, hands clasped, gray in his hair and more scars on her skin, but still fundamentally the same people who had found each other across the impossible divide of war. "You ever regret it?" Caleb asked. "Choosing this life? Which part?" "Freeing you from prison, marrying you, bearing your children, building this farm and this peace." Karga shook her head. "No, I regret none of it. Every choice led me here to this moment to you. How could I regret that? I just wonder sometimes if you miss it, the warrior life, the clan structure. Being around your own people. I visit the Bloodfire clan twice a year now. I train with them, feast with them, keep those connections alive. But this is my home." She gestured at the farm around them. "You are my home. You have been since that night you chose to help me despite every reason not to. When you bound my wounds and shared your water and refused to leave me behind even though I was your enemy. You were never my enemy. You were the woman who freed me when she had no reason to. You were mercy and courage and everything good." He raised her hand to his lips. "You still are." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere in the distance, a cow lowed. The wind rustled through the wheat in the east field. The farm settled into evening, peaceful and productive, and theirs. 20 years ago, Caleb had been a prisoner facing death in an enemy camp. 20 years ago, Karga had been a warrior growing disillusioned with violence. Neither of them could have predicted where that desperate night would lead them, the night she freed him and said, "Run now, thank me later." He had run, and he had thanked her every day since in 1,000 small ways and a few grand ones, with the life they built together, with the children they raised to believe in peace over war, with the love that sustained them through all the challenges and changes. "I should have said it then," Caleb mused. "When you freed me, I should have thanked you immediately instead of just running. You were busy surviving." "I understood," Karga smiled. "Besides, you have been thanking me every day for 20 years. I think that is better than anything you could have said in that moment. Still, thank you, Karga, for everything, for saving me, for choosing me, for building this beautiful, impossible life with me. Thank you for being worth saving, for making me believe in better things than war, for giving me a home and a family and a purpose beyond fighting." She leaned her head on his shoulder, "For loving me when so many said you should not." They sat until full dark, then walked back to the farmhouse hand in hand. Through the windows they could see Alina and Thomas in the parlor, his parents grown old but still healthy and sharp. Tomorrow Connor would arrive home on leave from the peacekeeping force, bringing with him a young woman he wanted them to meet. Next month Clara would return from college for the summer break. The farm would be full again, noisy with family and life and all the beautiful chaos that entailed. There would be work and worry and probably a few arguments, but there would also be laughter and love and the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. Caleb opened the door for Karga, and she paused on the threshold to kiss him, sweet and lingering. Then they went inside together, closing the door on the night and opening it on another day of the life they had chosen, the peace they had helped build, the love that had sustained them through everything. It was, Caleb thought as he followed his wife inside, exactly the life he was meant to live. The grateful acknowledgement he had wanted to give Karga 20 years ago had turned into 2 decades of shared joy and challenges, and he looked forward to spending the rest of his days continuing to express that gratitude in all the ways that mattered. They had run toward something better. And in the running, they had found each other and built everything that mattered. That was all the thanks either of them had ever needed.